Welcome back to today's The Iron Covenant. We will be dissecting a video from Apologetics Canada, and I'll be blunt. This is a masterclass in Ivory Tower detachment. Let's define the word apologetics. It comes from the Greek apologia, meaning to make a fierce formal defense. Yet these guys spend 46 minutes trying to avoid the physical reality of what actual self-defense requires. When you've actually stood on the watch and you've been through the fire and you know what's required for self-defense, you understand a lot more than these guys do. It's really sad seeing somebody as educated as Wes Huff coming out and knowing as little as he does about the actual world that he lives in. He's completely detached from society. He's a completely different class. These are the Pharisees that have put the ecclesia into a position where we are ruled by people who don't make sense, okay? These guys were not willing to pick up a sword and go fight in the name of anything. These guys sit in climate-controlled, air-conditioned rooms where they sit there over a microphone and talk about violence, okay? So let's kind of hear this real quick where Wes Huff starts out, the Huffster.
Time kind of thing. But Augustine writes this, and
talking about Augustine.
He's kind of, I think, trying to give parameters of how we understand things like self-defense, or what do we do? If you threaten my neighbor, do I have the right to intervene? Right. You've not been moved by persuasion in the conversation, and so what do I do?
Okay,
well,
so first things first.
Actually, I must force you to stop, and that's kind of the parameters of what are later articulated.
I must force you to stop.
So before we move on any further, I just kind of want us to sketch out what have been sort of the major response.
So what he does here is he says that if you're not moved by conversation, what if somebody comes to your door not willing to converse? Okay, the thing is that he's operating from a standpoint, and I hate to say this, but a standpoint of privilege. He's saying things that don't make sense because he doesn't live in a real society that actually doesn't respect boundaries or doesn't have order. Okay, so now what we're going to do is look at this guy Ben, and he's going to talk about the solemn soldier, the sad soldier, of how whenever you're operating within a war theater, that you should have some sort of solemnity because you're sad that you had to take lives and kill. Like, let's hear what he has to say.
Of God will hold. And what Niebuhr ultimately wanted was, and this is not satisfactory for everybody, but he wanted to make sad soldiers. He wanted to make the soldier not relish in what it was that they were doing. And I do think at the very least, the challenge for Christians is to say, we should be taking no pleasure in this, and yet it might still at some point be called for.
Yeah, isn't that part of sort of the private?
If you create sad soldiers, you know what you get? Liability. You get more bodies. When a man is kicking open a door and clearing a room, he can't be thinking about what just happened in the room behind him. The man has to be focused on the task at hand. But instead, they insist that we need, solemn soldiers. So basically, soldiers that go and cry away the crimes that they've committed during war. They don't even have an actual stance. They're so flimsy on their apologetics, they don't even know where they stand. They're sitting here supposed to put up a defense, but they have this weak, flimsy slave morality hierarchy where they kind of like, oh, well, if you have to defend yourself, you can, but, if I have to defend my neighbor, have I already tried to de-escalate it verbally? You know what's going to happen if you think that way? By the time you get to defending yourself, you're not going to be there.
That Augustine set out was that when a soldier goes to war, you almost have to do it in mourning.
Again, how many of these guys have actually done anything? None of them. None of them have actual backgrounds. They're except for in the Bible. I mean, Wesley Huff, for having a PhD, he's kind of I don't know, man. I don't know about this guy. And then we see here coming up, Wes is going to give his take on this exact idea.
Yeah, is that right?
Yeah, I think, if you look at Augustine, what he says is clear. Just wars are never holy wars, right? So there's like a division between there. And they're certainly not happy. Even in victory, he talks about war, which should only be done in the defense of innocent people, and the idea of trying to wipe a people off the face of the earth for some private interest.
Okay, so he's coming at it from a Roman perspective. He's giving out the Roman view.
Is evil. That the victor's celebration should be done, and he has this quote, if I'm remembering correctly, where he talks about that victory should be done only with tears and remorse. And specifically,
victory should be done with only tears and remorse. Am I saying that going to war is a great thing? No. I know people who have been in wars. I've lost family members in wars. You know, my whole family history is a legacy of warriors. But when we look at this idea of the crying, the sad, the remorseful soldier, that's not empowering. That's living in your past. That's living within your sin. So I don't understand how Wes Huff can't make an argument that doesn't contradict himself every other word. The guy speaks out of both sides of his mouth.
A just war should only be done when it establishes mutual peace between both parties. So waged only in self-defense or to retain stolen property.
Oh, so somebody comes into my house, steals my property, I'm allowed to wage war against them, is what he's saying. That makes plenty of sense. Again, in a combat zone, the last thing you need is somebody's emotions getting in the way of the mission. That's how you get people killed. Let's listen to what Wes has to say here about Jesus.
He tells his disciple to buy a sword. Not necessarily to defend him, but seemingly to defend themselves.
Sell your cloak and buy a sword.
This, I think, fits with what we see Paul later on in 12.
The thing about the sword is it wasn't a multi-tool. It was meant for slicing limbs. Okay? It was meant for fighting, war. If Jesus himself is telling you, go sell your robes so you can buy a sword, that says something. Yeah, you'd rather take the Roman idea and replace Jesus. I get the classicist idea here, but you're going right over the canon. If the theological framework here explicitly says that getting an armory is part of your religion, then why are you even questioning it over some sort of Roman historian? All right, now let's take a look at Steve's argument of true peace on the Korean DMZ would look like. Now, they are arguing what true peace means and what a just and holy war is.
Probably not.
Let's hear what they have to say about Korea. All right, and like I said, we're going to talk about what they believe a good end to Korea, the Korean Peninsula problem would be.
It's just war waiting for an opportunity to take place, right? They're talking to each other. Like, if you fire even a single bullet this way, we're going to come charging in, and
which has happened. Bullets have been, again, right away. These guys don't even know current political politics. So sometimes the shots are fired across that border, man. If you got a guy dipping across trying to escape North Korea into South Korea, or vice versa, which sometimes has happened, you can't go say, well, if one shot gets fired, then the whole war starts. No, because that hasn't happened. That hasn't happened, for one.
That kind of tension. But what would peace in the Korean Peninsula, what would that look like? Well, to me, it would look like reconciliation, where the border, the heavily fortified border, is removed. I'm not talking about, political...
You know what removing that border would do? The heavily fortified border? Sometimes when you take your defenses down, it leaves you open for attack. Yeah. If the North Koreans had all of a sudden South Korea was completely unarmed, North Korea would take over, and it would be a slaughter. So you're saying that we blindly lead our sheep to the slaughter.
Absorption, ideologically, one way or the other. But what I am saying is, between these two, that a very symbolic and very real kind of act of peacemaking would be to remove that border and have that reconciliation. Right? It's not just the lack of...
That's the thing. You, as an apologetic, you could sit there on your high horse in your Ivory Tower with the AC blowing, far away from the desert, and you could sit here and say these kind of things without having any kind of blowback. But the fact is that it's all crap.
War, but it is that active presence of reconciled, right relationship between the people. And I think when I think about peace...
the fact is that these are the same guys that said that you should be a sorrowful soldier. You should be sad about going to war and fighting a war. But then they say it's necessary. So even their own structure of their integrity is broken here. They can't even put together a coherent argument that actually makes sense, because they're just literally shooting the
Again, that's why we're talking about peacemaking, right, rather than peace.
Yeah, okay, peacemaking, that's what it would look like. How do you get there?
Keeping, because it is something that we need to work towards, because it's more than just lack of conflict and violence.
Okay, and I'm going to say this right now, it bothers the heck out of me. Blessed are the peacemakers, but these guys aren't peacemakers. He's sitting here talking about the peacemakers on his highly viewed YouTube channel, and I highly doubt he's doing anything physically on the ground to make peace with anyone. What has he done? What have any of these guys done? It's truly depressing.
It's the picture that almost this apocalyptic picture that we see of, no more weapons, no more tanks, no more drones and missiles, and so on.
It makes me think of, Augustine self-described as notoriously bad at political languages, Greek and Hebrew. He didn't really know them, and is very candid about that.
Yeah, he didn't know them, kind of like Wes Huff, right? Doesn't know his Greek and Hebrew.
And what his context for peace would have been, like, would he have understood shalom? I don't know.
Okay, so we're gonna break down the DMZ so we can have shalom.
Correctly. He does talk about the fact that he rejects Roman imperialism, and you do have a category within Roman imperialism of the Pax Romana, right? The Rome.
Okay, so does that mean that you're allowed to wage war because the Romans have conquered you, for instance, or is that not just either?
In peace, and Augustine rejected outright the Roman imperial reasons for war, which included things like expansion and protecting honor, and even the simple idea that Roman subjugation, due to its being bigger and better, was a justification, was the thrust behind the.
Okay, now my question would be for him, if you flip that around and you say, well, what about wars that were specifically ordained holy? What about the Crusades? Is that a holy war? Is that a just war? Is that righteous? Because it's a war.
Pax Romana, the Roman peace. It had to do with Rome thinking of itself as bigger and better, and
not just that, it has to do with the church trying to make itself bigger and better.
That giving it grounds to kill when they thought necessary, and Augustine rejects that. And I wonder if that's more analogous to what you see in somewhere like a dictatorial state like North Korea, right? It is there's this kind of
like
it's peace, but it's almost like a neutrality. Like it's balancing on a razor's edge, where a wind could blow one way or the other, and there's a tenuousness of that, and that's kind of what Augustine is living in. And so yes, he's giving these parameters. They're ideal, but
you look at him, and he's got his Roman helmet, and he's got all these books, and he's a very well put together individual indeed. But is he an actual warrior for Christ, or is he a warrior? He seems more. This man seems to be more of a warrior for Augustine than for Christ himself. This man is a Roman fanboy, and I don't want to say he's not a Christian, but his stances are very peculiar. I don't like these guys. I don't enjoy their content. I don't think they're intelligent. I don't think they put forward good arguments. Give me the Gladius and I'll pick it apart.